I mean, if you're a Bears fan, you're thinking forward progress. Come on.
10, 219, 219.
Forward Progress, a Chicago Bears podcast with Dan Bernstein and Matt Abatacola on 312 Sports.
Welcome to Forward Progress. Dan Bernstein solo today with Matt Abatacola on vacation, but I am joined by a familiar face and voice, that of ESPN senior NFL writer Kalyn Kahler, with us here on Forward Progress. Kalyn, how you been?
I'm doing well. We just talked about this. I'm working remotely from New Orleans. It's beautiful. The weather's great here. I've been to a second line. I've seen the Mardi Gras Indians. I've had a lot of beignets, and I promise I am doing work. I went to Tulane Pro Day yesterday and LSU Pro Day the day before.
Any notes from Tulane Pro Day? There's someone in my family that is going to be extremely interested in your thoughts on some of these possible NFLers.
I mean, I think the quarterback probably has a chance to.
Retzlaff?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that he's going to be drafted, but I'm sure he'll end up in a camp. And then who knows from there, but you never know what will happen with quarterbacks sort of late in the draft. And I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he was a late round pick, or definitely for him to end up in camp. And one thing that was interesting is I met their Tulane GM, because I'm fascinated with college GMs. So I beelined right over to him and I was like, hey, tell me about your job. Tell me what's going on here. And it was really interesting because what conference are they in? American?
The American. And they've got a brand new coach. Because remember, Sumrall left to go to Florida. So what's his name?
Yep.
Will
Hall?
Will Hall.
Hall. Yeah, he was there too. Nice guy. So what was interesting though is the GM was kind of explaining to me his thoughts on team building. And he was very much because I was like, well, who do you think the good college GMs are? And he was like, well, I think retention is more important than how well you played the portal. So that was an interesting viewpoint that not that I'd never heard that before, but that was interesting that that's sort of his strategy. And can't remember the number he gave me, but he was telling me that they were able to at Tulane, they're able to retain players pretty well in comparison to other programs, especially in the American Conference. He was saying how many players their competitors had lost versus how many they had lost in the portal. And I can't remember the specific numbers right now because I wasn't taking notes, but it was kind of interesting to hear that. And then he also said that, and I would not be able to name who the quarterbacks are there that are competing for the job next year. I have no idea who any of them are, but he was telling me that their entire quarterback room, there were 4 or 5 guys that they have. 2 who are probably battling it out, but then there's a few more in the room. And he said that their room combined are getting paid less than South Florida starter. So he was kind of saying that there is this huge divide between schools that pay $1 million or more for their quarterback and schools that are paying in the low 100,000s for their starting quarterback. And he was like, honestly, I just don't think that you have to have the double, $2 million quarterback to win games. And he was at Houston before. So his record being a GM or being on the collective side of things is he has a really good, he was adding it up in his head and he's I'm 43-12. So he has done a good job. He literally did mental math to be how good am I? How good have I done when I've been in this role? Because I'm how do you evaluate a college GM other than, I guess, wins and losses? And so it was just kind of interesting to just be able to pick his brain about what's happening in college football, because I'm sort of fascinated with that because it's a new job. This job did not exist before the portal, obviously, or before really NIL. So everyone's just kind of figuring it out and sort of inventing the role as they go. So I thought that was really interesting to kind of get his perspective on how much to pay quarterbacks, how to build a team, that kind of thing.
Well, I think you're describing how we would judge them. It would be that record up against per dollar.
Yeah.
Right. If you say, look, I can do more with less. Here, you don't have to throw around all this collective money. I can spend your money more efficiently. I think that's how a GM in any business, that we can be a very successful business, and I can make sure we get the most out of every dollar, right?
Yeah, and he was saying too how like they try to keep their coaching staff removed from the money and the financial aspect of it because he's like, we don't want our coaches to be like making decisions on playing time or depth charts based
Welcome
off
to
of
pro sports, baby.
based off
Yep.
of knowing how much they make. So I thought that
Yep.
was kind of interesting too. Because that definitely, just in talking to other people at different programs, like that's definitely something that's happening across all sports in college where it's like a freshman comes in who's making more than, a junior who's on the roster. And then all of a sudden the junior doesn't play anymore because the freshman, they need to like, get the ROI on the freshman more. So that was kind of interesting too. But yeah, so I don't have a lot of Tulane player information.
Yeah, no, I don't want to get sidetracked here because I know we're here to talk NFL, but you're in one of my favorite cities in the world, and
so great.
don't just make sure I'll text you after with a couple of restaurant recommendations.
Yeah.
How many more nights do you have there?
I'm here till Sunday morning.
Oh, okay. Because
So
there are some places that are absolutely can't miss that are kind of off the beaten path that aren't necessarily the super touristy places.
Yeah, please.
So, and because you're at the moment you're doing one of my least favorite things in journalism, and that is covering meetings.
Yeah.
It's miserable. Well,
It's
and
terrible.
I've been at so many like the airport hotels and just sitting in ballrooms and eating room temperature chicken fingers,
Yes.
waiting for doors to open so you can find out what you need to find out.
Yeah.
So what matters right now is all the NFL cognoscenti is talking things over. What's on the Kalyn Kahler list of what matters?
Yeah, this was actually a pretty boring year when it comes to rules proposals. Like normally, like the fun thing about these March meetings is like there will be a couple interesting proposals that are either controversial or are just fascinating in terms of how they're going to change the game, like how the game is actually played. A couple of years ago was the kickoff, right? 2 years ago, that was the big thing. Okay, they're going to change the whole kickoff formation. Like, what is that going to look like? There was a whole committee of special teams coaches who went to the meetings, and that was sort of the big topic. Last year, the big topic was the Tush Push, which I covered really closely.
I think of the Tush Push as like your pet.
It is.
It's like you have a little, you keep it in a crate.
Yeah.
You occasionally will buy it treats, and it'll
Mhm.
walk around the couch every once in a while.
Yes.
It's because that you have some ownership in it.
Yeah, and my pet this year is safe. My pet is not going to go extinct yet.
Okay, good.
So this is the good news. And I actually just got off a press conference with the Rich McKay, who's in charge of the competition committee, and Jeff Miller, who is a communications guy for the NFL. So they were kind of going over all of these storylines and points, and they did get asked about the Tush Push. We knew at the combine, no club had submitted a proposal like the Packers did last year to attempt to eliminate it. But what I will say is I wasn't surprised by that at all, because during the season, there were a few flashpoints where I thought, it's going to come back again, because the issue of false starts on the offensive line and offsides on the defensive line was coming up multiple times. It was like week 2. Barely any football had been played. Eagles were at the Chiefs, and it came up a few times in that game. And it was people were really up in arms on Twitter. And I try to keep track of like the flashpoints of the Tush Push. I have like a Google Doc where every time I see something, I'm trying to put it in there.
I'm sure you have multiple. Yes.
Yeah. So I early in the season, I was like, okay, I think this is going to come back up because it feels like people are still mad about it. And the difference was, last year when they brought it up, they did not focus at all on the officiating aspect of the play, of how difficult it is to officiate. That was not the Packers' part of their proposal at all. It was all about health and safety and like pace of play. It was not about, okay, this is actually a play that's setting our officials up for failure because they cannot see what's going on. And the play itself is so low to the ground, and it's so based off of like who's moving first and based off of snap counts. Because earlier in the season, the Eagles were accusing opponents of mimicking Jalen Hurts' snap count, which is a penalty in itself, but it's never called because officials they can't really hear well enough to be like, this is exactly what's going on here. And the defensive linemen are allowed to use words like move, move. They
the
say that all
Bears
the time.
did that. And
Yeah.
Andrew Billings, drew a bunch of false starts
Yeah,
with that move
he's
call.
been good at that. And it's called stimming on defense. So like they're allowed to do stemming. Sorry, not stimming. Stimming is like an autism term, I believe. Stemming stemming is the football term. It's called stemming on defensive line, where you all of a sudden as a group you shift really quickly and you move over, and a lot of times there's like a word associated with it. It might be like jump, it might be move, it might be literally shift or whatever. But sometimes those words sound like your snap count, and so it can be really tricky. Are they crossing a line? Are they not crossing a line? Anyways, it became very clear earlier this season that the tush push was becoming very difficult for officials to correctly call, and because of that, people were getting mad about it. Coaches were getting mad, fans were getting mad, whatever. So I thought, okay, earlier this past season, I was like, all right, this might come up again and I thought it might come from the competition committee this time, because this time, if they did focus on the officiating aspect, I actually think they could get that passed, because most teams would agree this is really hard to officiate. And then you would probably have the support. Like I've talked to officials about this. It's difficult for them to see what's going on. And even when they get the point of emphasis from the officiating department of like, hey, you got to call this tight, which they did last year after the Chiefs game, I believe it was in week 2, they got a reminder about that. Even when they get a reminder, it's like, it's still really hard for them to properly call this. And it's really not their fault. It's like just an impossible play to officiate. So anyways, I thought maybe the competition committee was going to send something forward. So it wouldn't be from a club. It would just be coming from the competition committee. And they didn't do that last year. And I think the reason they didn't do that last year, what I've heard, is that the league didn't really want it to seem like they were targeting one team, right? Which was the Eagles. And the Eagles were obviously a successful team last year. They won the Super Bowl. This year, the Eagles weren't as good. So I think as the season went on, the storyline sort of died down a little bit. And last year in my reporting as well, it became very clear. I can't really specifically source this, but like it became very clear to me that the Packers put forth that proposal basically for the league office. Like the league office was using
They were
the
a
Packers.
proxy. Yes. They said, please do this for us. Yep.
Because it's very well known Goodell does not like the play, and like the competition committee doesn't like the play.
But aren't we seeing the game take care of it? Can't we get a
Yes,
little
I think so.
natural
Yes.
evolution in that teams are stopping it? Teams aren't as successful.
Yeah.
I mean, part of it was, the Eagles are really good. They caught everybody a little off guard. You might have had one of the greatest centers of all time who was uniquely talented at it. And now, that we've seen some variations. I remember Ben Johnson saying, well, I don't like it because we can't have explosives off of it, so I don't use it. And we have seen teams get some explosive plays off some fakes in there.
The Steelers at Chicago.
Yes. We saw it. And that's exactly what I was thinking. Like, Ben, here it is. But that, what that makes it? That makes it just another play.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
and if in fact it recedes into the noise of every other play, then that takes care of it.
I think that's what's happening. Like the Eagles weren't as successful at it this year. And I think like literally on this press conference I was just on, when they were asked about the tush push, I believe they said that the normal quarterback sneaks are more successful than tush push now, which is probably true. I haven't looked at the stats recently enough to like fact check that, but like that's probably true. And like the thing that never made sense about this like movement to ban this play was that like the quarterback sneak would still exist, and the quarterback sneak, like the Eagles could do a quarterback sneak in the same like low to the ground, almost looks like a rugby scrum. Like they could do their quarterback sneak out of that same position and just not have anyone touch the quarterback, and it would still probably have the same success rate. And it would still be incredibly difficult to officiate, and people would still be complaining about it. And so it's like eliminating the push aspect was never actually going to solve anybody's problem here. They were just mad that the one team was nearly automatic on a play that was considered boring. And it would be the exact same play if no one was behind Jalen Hurts. I mean, maybe you're a couple percentage points less successful, but like the majority of the time when you watched it, the person behind is really just there for insurance. Like he's not quite there to like actually send it over for success. So yeah, anyways, it's not a talking point this year. It's not up for debate this year. And I do think the natural selection or the natural order of football is going to handle it. And that's how it should be, because the game, it should evolve offense versus defense, right? Like it's continually evolving.
It's the dialectic, right? You know, it's thesis, antithesis, synthesis, and then that's how the game should. That's how it's always worked. Now, those of us who have read, was it Blood, Sweat, and Chalk, and talking about this offense begets this defense, which begets this offense, and then this rules change sort of changes everything, and all these coaches somehow figure it out. It's one of the things we love about the game in that way, where we don't have these sacrosanct rules, and there always are ways to get a leg up. Now, with that, let me globalize this by talking about officiating in general. Because when you say that play is hard to officiate, I would argue every play in the NFL is hard to officiate.
Yeah, definitely.
Because they're moving too fast, and they're enormous, and it's chaotic, and it's raining and snowing, and everything else is going on. But if we're looking potentially at a lockout of officials, am I hearing correctly that there might be a temporary giant mega replay center that could possibly save us from what they believe would be way more bad calls?
So it's basically the replay center that already exists. I mean, it is the replay center that already exists. It's just giving them increased power to override a call on the field, basically, without limit, essentially. Like right now, it would have to go to a review, and then the league office, sometimes the league office can initiate a review, but this would be like any call. And there's limits on what they can, right now there are limits on the certain penalties that they can.
Well, let's go back. Are we going to have a lock? Will there be a lockout?
I think there's a good chance based off of, I've talked to both sides, like people on both sides of this. And like every person you talk to is going to have a different opinion. But the reality right now is that this CBA expires in a little over 2 months, May 31st. And the league will tell you we've been trying to get this done for 2 years. And just today, Jeff Miller said the negotiations are taking longer, aren't happening as quickly as expected, I think was his direct quote. Mm-hmm. And he was asked like, well, how confident are you that what would you tell fans about like where this is going to go and how confident you are that you're going to come to an agreement? And he didn't issue like any really confident proclamation of like, I know we're going to get this done. All he said was like, we're willing to work through this. We're at the negotiating table. But I mean, if you just read into the NFL's actions right now, they are taking all the contingency steps that they need to take to prepare for a lockout, which of course they're going to need to do that at this point. Like if you get within 2 months of a deal expiring, you need to start thinking about what are the backup plans.
Well, it's not just that, it's part of the negotiation. Because I mean, I want the officials, if I'm the NFL, I want the officials to be like, yeah, you can ask whatever you want, but we can stare into this abyss and not be worried about you not being here. We're going to go about our business. I mean, even if privately they're like, oh God, we can't live without these people. They can't show that at the table right now.
It's going to be interesting going into the owners' meetings this week to talk to coaches and general managers and owners about like what they think of this, because I think obviously the NFL's messaging has been very much like this is on the officials. Like they don't want to be better. It's kind of what their messaging is right now, because the league has said through Jeff Miller, like twice in this last week now, all we want is for the officials to be accountable. We just want to improve performance and accountability. Those are their talking points. And the specifics of what that means is essentially they want to be able to increase the probationary period. Right now it's at 3 years. So if an official is in their first 3 years, the league can fire them for no reason, for whatever reason they want to. They don't have to give a reason. They can just say, you're not good enough, you're out of here. The league wants to increase that period to 4 years. And they claim, oh, this is because we want to actually help them get better for that 4th year. But on the flip side, obviously the union is going to think, well, that's because you just want a 4th year to be able to fire someone without cause. So that's a sticking point. Another sticking point is the dead period. Right now, the officials aren't able to be contacted by the NFL from the Super Bowl to, I think it's May 15th. The league wants to shorten that dead period. Again, they say because of accountability. They want to offer programs of development to get these officials better, to give them more training. But when you ask them specifically, which I did today, I said, what training program do you plan to fill the dead period with? Like, what is the plan? They won't get into the specifics. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean they don't have specifics, but from my conversations on this, I sort of doubt that the league has specific plans on how to make the officials better. I think it's a lot of chatter at the current moment.
And full-time is not being discussed?
It is. And what's interesting, a lot of people don't realize this, the current CBA that they are currently working under, the league has had the ability to make 17 officials full-time since that CBA was negotiated, which I think was 2019. So this whole time they could have had 17 full-time officials, not the whole, obviously that's only, one per crew essentially, but they could have had that. And there was a time, I think it was 2019. I still need to do the research and look this up a little bit more, but multiple people I've spoke to have told me in 2019, the league started to try to make the 17 full-time, right when the CBA began. And then, whatever you want to blame it on, COVID happened right after that. The program sort of fell apart because there wasn't enough structure of what are we doing with them full-time? So I know that that's one of the questions to figure out in this negotiation is okay, if you want to make some of them full-time, the union's willing to do that. The officials are willing to do that. Some of them are, but the other thing you have to work out here too is most of these officials have very successful careers in other fields. They are making a lot of money in their regular jobs. They're attorneys. They own their own businesses. Some of them are a gym teacher, right? But
yeah,
a lot of them,
some are athletic directors for, or small colleges or high schools, or you get people with real lives and work.
And so they're basically having two great salaries right now. And so that I think is going to be something that sounds easy to do. We want to be full-time, but also then you're asking them to give up a whole other stream of income that they already have that. So I think it's harder than it sounds to just be okay, we're going to make them all full time. And the league claims that they have no issue with pay. They're we will pay we will pay for performance is what Jeff Miller said today. But another issue I think that I've heard is going on is obviously NFL officials are paid per game. There's only 20 games, right? For most of them. So they are making less money than officials in other sports because there's less product of games, but they're working all every game. They're at every game. So there's the argument there of we are the union will say they're the worst paid officials in professional sports, which is, I'm sure that is true because they have less games. So then you have that issue of you're paid per game, there's less inventory. What does that mean? And then also the league, I think, wants the ability to have rookie officials work the postseason if they think they're good enough. And they just want more flexibility with determining postseason assignments and also determining the bonus pay. They only want the bonus pay to go to the highest performing officials, which is obviously something a union is not going to want to agree to. So yeah, I don't know. I get the sense, if I had to predict, I kind of feel they are headed to a lockout at this current moment, because I know they met last week in DC, and after they met last week in DC is when the NFL started contacting small college officials to see if they could start organizing a backup crew. And after that too is when, this rules proposal comes out. So clearly the negotiation last week in DC did not get them anywhere. So, I'm sure they have many more coming up, but it'll be really interesting to see what the chatter is about this at the owners' meetings. Because the other thing is this centralized replay idea. If they have to resort to this, where the AMGC basically can overturn and fix every call from the officials from New York, Which also, side note, the people that work in the replay center are part of the NFLRA as well.
Wait,
however,
AMGC stands for what?
Art McNally Game Day Central. It's just the name for the replay room. It's really, we're talking about the same thing. It's in the league it's in the league's office in New York. So the replay officials who work from there, they are part of the NFL Referees Association as well. They are part of the union. However, they have a different CBA. So they're on a different deal because the league wouldn't want both of these entities to be locking out at the same time. So the replay officials will be working no matter what because their CBA is next year. So they'll be working no matter what. And the interesting thing about this that I think is going to come up this week is like, if they have to resort to this, it's almost like, why wouldn't you just have it all the time?
All the time. That was my next question. Like, if this works too well, then there might be other jobs at stake here. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, I mean, I still think they're going to need on-field officials no matter what. But that responsibility may be, weakened, lessened, whatever. But I do think that's going to be something that's an interesting point is like, I think that's going to be an idea that's popular among owners because I know that there are owners who are very frustrated with officiating. I've heard that from executives who
we all are. Yeah. We all are. It's bad for the game to not know if what you saw happened or not. When you're holding, it's like, well, that was an awesome play. Oh my, is it real? Did it happen? Are there flags? Is there a challenge? Like that, it changes the nature of the consumption of the game to have this delay between celebration and then, either it unhappened or it has to be confirmed that it happened.
And it's so hard because there's really no good solution to any of it, to be honest, because like a great example is the Rams submitted 2 proposals, or they intended to submit 2 rules proposals.
Was this about the Zach Charbonnet 2-point conversion where it was the broadcast that saw it and then that got down to the okay, because that was wild.
Yeah, and so they were obviously pissed off about that because that basically cost them a chance to go to the Super Bowl. So they submitted 2 proposals based off of that. And well, no, that was the other Seahawks Rams game. I'm sorry, but it was still very, very pivotal to their season. Mm-hmm. They submitted 2 proposals, or intended to submit 2 proposals based off of that. One was about making a 40-second clock where within the 40 seconds after the play, you would need to initiate a replay review, and if you hadn't, you couldn't after that point. Because that was their issue with that, is it took way too long for the review to be initiated. Because as you mentioned, the broadcast had to alert the NFL that like, oh, this should be reviewed. Like, what are we doing here? And then the second was about the touching was about I'm going to butcher this, like a backward pass and how it should be brought to the point where it was thrown instead of the point where it was touched on the field.
Okay.
Or recovered. It should just be like, it should just go back to the point where the ball left the quarterback's hands. And then they didn't think that one through because it was like, well, what would happen if a snap went through the quarterback's hands and then it's behind you and then we're moving the whole play behind instead of, I don't know. So they didn't, like, again, I'm kind of butchering that one, but they didn't, the point here is that they intended to submit these 2 and they didn't even end up, they withdrew both of them because they basically realized like neither of these proposals actually make sense. And there's holes in all of these proposals.
It does not make sense.
Like
we rescind it.
There may be a solution to that specific issue, but they hadn't actually figured it out yet. And so, because there were holes in both of those proposals, because if because then on the flip side, it's like, well, someone else is going to get mad when something should have been reviewed and it wasn't, and because it was 45 seconds later instead of 40, right? Like no one, they were not going to get clubs to all agree to that because there's clearly issues with both of those proposals. So it's like, it is a very difficult to think you can come in and improve officiating. And a lot of people have ideas, but like, it seems just like every idea has like some flaw to it.
So here's what I want to know. What I do know about covering meetings is that because of the downtime that you have, and because of the keen eye of good reporters like you, seeing somebody out of the corner of your eye and going, oh, look who's wandering around here.
Yeah.
Look who's in line for a cup of coffee, or look who's just sitting in the front not talking to anybody. that there's opportunities that you don't even know to find out things. What is being said about the Bears? You don't have to put names on this, but I just want some blind items here. What good stuff, bad stuff? Where are the Bears in the conversation, in the chatter?
In the football conversation, very positive, like really positive. Everyone, I mean, great things about Ben Johnson. He's widely respected. That's not a surprise to anyone around the NFL. Like, you know, that is really positive. I think the one thing I've heard is like his rivalry with Matt LaFleur is some chatter of like what went on there. Did something actually go on there? Yeah, nobody knows. So I still don't know. I still have not uncovered like any sort of specific instance between them or specific beef or anything. But
it's like a wrestling bit. Seriously, and it may be.
Yeah. But I do think that like Matt LaFleur is sort of unpopular in general. So now I don't know, but I don't know specifically why between Ben Johnson and Matt LaFleur, but I do think that like within the division, I think he has rubbed some other coaches the wrong way, not just Ben Johnson. So that's kind of interesting. And then, so from a football sense, I think everyone is very positive about Chicago. And I would say, but from a off the field sense, the stadium stuff is a topic of conversation for sure. Like when I was at the combine and I meet, like if you're meeting someone new or if they just know you're from Chicago, like, well, what do you think the Bears are like? What do you think's going to happen with the stadium? Like, what do you think's going on? And I'm like, it's another one where I'm like, I can't even predict what's going to happen here because I feel like things that I've been told, like from the team or from people around the team.
Most of the stuff the team is telling is probably garbage, right?
Exactly. And I'm like, I don't even know what to make of any of it because you just know that like the media is being used in this, as in most situations, like we are being used in a lot of different ways. And it's like, I'm aware of that, but I also am like, well, I just have no idea what any of this means because I don't know the Bears' end goal is to get the best deal. Obviously, like they want to get the best stadium deal. And I think if that's in Illinois, that's better than if it's in Indiana. But I don't think, I think they're going to take whatever deal makes the most sense to them. So I'm like very cognizant that like anything I'm hearing about this, I'm like, I haven't tweeted like anything because I'm just like, I'm so aware that none of this is real and I'm just being used. So I'm like, I'm not going to do anything, but I will say there is a lot of interest league wide about like, what are the Bears going to do here? And I think a lot of people, I don't know. I think the majority of the conversations that I've had have been very much like they're going to Indiana because it's going to be the better deal. And a lot of comparisons made between obviously the Giants, Jets, and East Rutherford. That's not New York, it's New Jersey. The Niners in Santa Clara, that is not San Francisco. It's actually quite far from San Francisco.
I'll take all those bets. Those bets. And if anybody thinks they're going to Indiana, they're going to have to know a lot more about the environmental issues on that site. And going to learn about the Superfund and what it's going to take to clean up that entire area before it's ready to have a stadium there.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, you know a lot. Yeah, you know a lot more. But there is a lot of, there's a lot of questions of like, what are they? And what's interesting is like George McCaskey theoretically will be at the owners' meetings. Ooh. In theory. He's usually always there. And, will he say anything is the other question. I did actually see him at the combine and I said, are you going to talk about this at owners meetings? Like, we haven't heard from you because that's the thing I think I'm interested in. We've heard from Kevin Warren's statements, right? Multiple statements from Kevin Warren, which have had some interesting, strange timing that has made me.
And a lot of it's just complete horse shit.
Yes. And so I asked George, I was like, are we going to hear from you at the owners meetings? And he was like, I don't know. I'm not sure we'll have a resolution by then. So it sounded like to me he probably wasn't going to say anything, because I don't think he's going to say anything until this is over.
It's a big week in Springfield because the legislature's in session. They're dealing with a lot of stuff. Pritzker spoke yesterday, and if you read Pritzker's comments from yesterday, where it seems like he kind of punted it to the leadership in the legislature, that there's a question about whether or not the Bears could be entitled to both a pilot program, the payment in lieu of taxes, and the SNAP arrangement for how the bonds would be paid. And they don't really want them to double dip, and they want more local control in there. But I think it's probably closer than they're letting on, but it may just have to wait until May, and they're not going to get it as soon as they want. But I think, I believe tomorrow might be the last chance to move anything actually down in Springfield. So we're all kind of waiting on that to see if they're going to. I don't think they're going to hurry anything through, but to me, based on everything I'm reading that's coming out of Springfield, that there haven't been any major impediments in the move toward getting them to Arlington Heights.
Yeah, and I will say too, like, one thing that's come up with just people around the league who bring this up is, they've wondered, why don't the Bears, like, they're going to have when the controlling owner passes, there's the estate tax issue that comes up. So I've heard people bring that up, and I honestly don't have a good enough understanding of exactly what it means. But I do know Mark Davis with the Raiders, when this happened, his mother, Carol, I believe her name was, she died recently, and that affected their estate tax, and he had to take on several new partners I think because of that, he had to take on several new partners, Tom Brady, and then I think there were 3 other minority owners that he added into the ownership stakes. And so I don't know the Bears' current breakdown of, like, if they can take on more minority partners and still maintain the McCaskies still maintain controlling stakes in the team. When you're talking about the McKenna shares and the Pat Ryan shares, that I wouldn't say it's messy, but I would say it's complicated. Yeah,
because the rules now of allowing, what was it, 10% for private equity, and to say that, look, if you needed that money to help build a stadium, but it wasn't even enough to change the stadium math.
Yeah, okay.
That I know that whatever that influx is wasn't enough to really move the needle.
That's what I wondered for a while. I was like, why don't they just sell 10% private equity to have the money to build in Illinois and pay that property tax?
It's not enough.
Interesting. Okay.
It's not enough because they said $2 billion for this building here. No way. Yeah. No way with the material costs now and with where they're. I know the Pritzker's office was looking at the project in Arlington Heights. They were looking at a minimum of like $7 billion.
Wow.
With all the stuff, and then what they're going to parcel out for their own property tax purpose reasons, that the Bears might have all the land and then piecemeal it off to change some of the tax responsibilities in what they're going to do around the stadium. And they can't do any of that in Indiana. None of that. Right. That is just a building and some parking. That is not their whole entertainment district, which is where you got to make the money anyway. Anyway, I know you got to go. Thank you for sticking around, and thanks for doing this today. Thank you for being generous with your time and sharing all that fun stuff. I will text you New Orleans restaurants because there's a couple of can't miss places I got in there. I'll just tell you, Sophia for Italian. It's a little further out of downtown, but Sophia is absolutely wonderful. There is in closer to where you are, Pesh. I'm
going there. I'm going there tomorrow.
It's great.
Yeah,
it's absolutely phenomenal.
Amazing.
Pesh is great, and the other one is Cochon.
Yes.
Cochon.
Yeah. I went to their lunch deli, but I haven't been to their restaurant.
No, there's a rabbit. Oh my God. I don't know how adventurous an eater you are.
I like rabbit, yeah.
Yeah, they do this rabbit and dumpling thing that's incredible.
Wow.
So yes, enjoy.
Cool. Thanks, Dan. Good to see you.
Thanks for joining us. Bye. That is Kalyn Kahler of ESPN, their senior NFL writer. That stuff about Matt LaFleur is pretty juicy right there. That's a nice little nugget. Thank you for joining us. That is Forward Progress, a Chicago Bears and NFL podcast. And I'm Dan Bernstein. We'll catch you tomorrow.
Forward progress has stopped. 10, 219, 219.
Forward Progress, a Chicago Bears podcast with Dan Bernstein and Matt Abatacola on 312 Sports.